The Arctic stretched out in every direction like an endless white desert, silent and merciless. The ground was buried under thick layers of snow, the sky heavy with gray clouds, and the wind cut like knives through skin and bone. It was the kind of place that killed quickly, not just with cold, but with loneliness. And yet deep inside this frozen wasteland, something moved. Shapes walked against the storm. Some were human, some were not. They had entered the simulation believing it was a test of survival, just another challenge. But when the first scream echoed across the empty fields of ice, everyone understood too late. This was not just a simulation. This was a hunt. No one ever came back from the Arctic simulation. That was the whispered truth, the story told by those who had only seen the aftermath. Groups went in, but no groups came out. The simulation was created to test the limits of every species that dared. Step inside, but over time it became something else, a warning. The hunters inside were not machines, nor simple holograms. They were real, engineered predators, built for one purpose: to chase, to track, and to kill. The Arctic was their domain, and they knew every shadow, every storm, every heartbeat of the land. Against them, survival was nearly impossible. The latest group of entrants stood together at the edge of the white world, the gates of the simulation closing behind them with a metallic hiss that echoed like a final goodbye. There were 10 of them, warriors, soldiers, fighters, each from different corners of the galaxy. They wore heavy coats and boots designed for the cold, but the chill still seeped into their bones. The snow swallowed their footprints almost as fast as they made them. At first they tried to stay close. That was the instinct of the inexperienced strength. In numbers. But in the Arctic simulation, numbers meant nothing. Somewhere out in the white haze, movement flickered. Shadows, shapes gliding low against the snow, circling, waiting. One of the soldiers shouted for everyone to spread out, but his voice was swallowed by the wind. Another hissed that they should stay together. Fear spread quickly, faster than frostbite, faster than the storm, and then it came. The first hunter. Struck without warning. A blur of claws and teeth, larger than any predator found on natural worlds, slammed into one of the fighters at the back of the group. There was no time to react, no time to scream properly. The snow turned red, and the body was dragged away into the storm, leaving behind only silence and the horrified faces of the survivors. They hadn't even seen what attacked. Only the blood in the snow told the story. Panic followed. Da-da-da-da-da. Some ran. Some tried to hold their ground. But the Arctic didn't forgive mistakes. Another shadow broke through the storm, a second hunter moving like a phantom, fast and silent until it struck. The group's formation shattered, fear taking over reason. Among them was a human. He did not shout. He did not run blindly into the white. He crouched low, his eyes narrowing, watching the storm, listening. His breath fogged in the frozen air, but his heartbeat remained steady. Unlike the others, he had expected this. Something in his calmness was strange, almost unnatural, as if he knew the Arctic better than it knew itself. The others stumbled around him, their boots sinking deep in the snow. One alien screamed that they were trapped, that the hunters would kill them all. Another pointed wildly into the storm, swearing he saw movement, though there was nothing there but wind. The group was falling apart. And the hunters had only just begun their game. The human took a slow step back, eyes still scanning. The storm. His hand brushed against the snow, feeling its weight, its texture. He noticed how the flakes fell faster now, thickening into a veil that blurred vision. A storm was rising. For the others, that would mean death. For him it meant something else. Cover. Another scream cut through the night. The hunters were working. Closer, faster, circling the group like wolves. Every death was meant to drive the survivors deeper into fear, deeper into chaos. The hunters fed on panic as much as they fed on flesh. The human finally moved. He did not shout to the others, did not waste breath telling them to run or fight. Instead, he slipped into the storm, away from the group, his movements careful, precise. He left only faint tracks, half hidden by the falling snow. While the hunter's attention remained on the panicked crowd, He vanished into the white, swallowed by the blizzard. One of the survivors saw him go. A terrified alien soldier turned his head and shouted after him, demanding he come back, demanding they stay together. But his voice carried only to the storm. The human was gone. The hunters closed in, and the group's numbers shrank with every passing minute. The Arctic simulation was doing what it always did, racing hope one body at a time. Yet far away, hidden by the storm, the human kept walking, calm and deliberate. For the first time in the history of the simulation, a trail had been lost. The hunters searched, their senses sharp, but the storm carried his scent away, buried his footsteps and shielded his form. It was as if the Arctic itself had chosen to hide him, and somewhere deep inside the control room, where unseen watchers monitored every detail, alarms began to flicker on the screens. One of the supervisors leaned forward, frowning. "We've lost visual on one of them," he muttered. Another operator checked the tracking system. "That's impossible." No one slips away from the hunters. Yet the screen was clear. Human had disappeared into the endless snowstorm. The moment the second phase of the simulation started, the frozen silence of the Arctic was broken by a sound that did not belong to nature. It was a deep, mechanical hum that rolled across the icy plain like thunder. The contestants, already struggling to breathe in the sharp cold, turned their heads toward the sound. A shadow moved along the snow ridges, tall and inhuman, its shape shifting with every flicker of pale light from the artificial aurora above. No one knew what it was, only that it was moving closer. The watchers outside the simulation leaned forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the screens. They had seen this before. They'd seen the hunt unfold many times, but never had they seen a human face among the prey. The hunters were not men. They were machines built for pursuit, crafted to look like monstrous wolves of steel and ice. Their jaws dripped with frost, their eyes burned with a dull red glow, and their paws slammed against the frozen ground with weight that cracked the ice beneath. Each step echoed like a hammer striking stone. The contestants froze in terror, then scattered across the open white, running without a plan, without a thought, just trying to get away. But running in the Arctic was a mistake. The snow swallowed their legs. The cold cut their lungs. Their footprints betrayed them. And above all, the hunters were faster. The human, covered in layers of ragged gear taken from the supply drop, did not run blindly like the others. He crouched low, watching the machines spread out. He could see the pattern to hunters circling wide. One moving down the center, another vanishing into the ridges to cut off escape. It was not chaos, it was strategy. They hunted as if they knew the prey better than the prey knew itself. The man's breath formed clouds in the air, and though his heart thundered with fear, his eyes were steady. Unlike the others, he had studied patterns, movements, survival. He knew that running meant death, surviving meant thinking. Screams pierced the frozen night. A contestant slipped, buried half into the snow, his arm thrashing wildly before the metal jaws clamped down. The machine pulled him into the white, and the sound was cut off almost instantly. Another tried to hide behind a jagged block of ice, but the red glow of the hunter's eyes scanned through the snow like fire through smoke. The block shattered under its weight, and silence followed again. The watchers outside did not look. Away, they never did. The simulation was not made for escape. It was made for spectacle. The more brutal the hunt, the longer they watched. The human moved differently. He crouched low, pressed against the wind, and slid along the snow in silence. His hands brushed the ice, feeling for weaknesses in the surface. A memory flickered. In his mind, ice was not solid everywhere. Some layers were hollow, thin, waiting for weight to break them. If he could trick a hunter into chasing him over the wrong ground, maybe the machine would fall. That meant letting it follow him. That meant getting close enough to be seen. He stared at the glow in the distance, at the red lights scanning the horizon, and he knew what had to be done. The hunters were merciless, but not perfect. Their speed and strength were unmatched, yet their design was bound to rules programmed. Paths, predictable turns, and blind spots when their weight shifted. The humans studied these flaws with every second. When one wolf machine turned its head, its neck joints locked for half a breath. When it landed after a leap, its sensors flickered. For just an instant, there were small gaps. Invisible to those two, afraid to see but to him, they were openings. And in a place where no one had ever escaped, even a small opening was everything. The night grew colder. The blizzard thickened. Snow fell like a curtain, cutting the contestants off from each other. They were alone, every one of them, hearing only the crunch of snow and the growl of the hunters closing in. The human pressed himself into the hollow of a ridge, pulling his body low, covering his face with his arms so his breath would not give him away. He waited, silent as one of the metal beasts passed above him, its claws carving deep trenches in the ice. For a second, its red light scanned past the hollow, missing him entirely. His heart pounded in his throat, but he did not move. When the beast was gone, he pushed forward again, crawling into the storm. He could hear the cries of the others fading one by one. The machines were winning as they always had. The prey was thinning. Soon, only he would be left. And when that time came, the hunters would focus entirely on him. That was the moment he feared on, the moment he prepared for. Because unlike the others, he did not plan to die in this place. He would turn the Arctic itself into his weapon. He would vanish into the storm, and for the first time since the simulation began, something unexpected stirred. The watchers leaned in closer, whispering. A human was not supposed to last this long. A human was not supposed to think like this. The game was shifting, and no one, not even the masters of the simulation, could tell where it was heading. The storm raged harder as the night stretched on. Snow whipped across the frozen land like blades, cutting vision down to shadows and shapes. The contestants who had not yet fallen were stumbling, half blind, their clothes soaked through, their breath burning in their throats. But the human was different. He was not wandering aimlessly. Every step he took was chosen. Every path he followed was guided by something the others had ignored. The land itself, the Arctic, cruel and merciless, was no friend to anyone. But in its shifting ground, its cracks, its hollows, there was a chance, a weapon to turn against. The hunters had seen it earlier, a wide stretch of ice where the wind carried a hollow sound. Beneath it was water, dark and heavy, waiting like a hidden mouth. The machines were heavy, their metal bodies weighing more than any living predator. If he could lead one onto that ground, the ice would shatter under its claws. It was dangerous because if he misstepped, the same hole would swallow him. But there was no other way. Against a machine that could outrun and outfight him. The only weapon he had was nature itself. He moved quickly now, crouched low as the red glow of the hunters swept through the storm. One of them had fixed on him. He could hear its paws hammering against the ice, closing the distance with terrifying speed. The growl of its engines cut through the wind. The watchers outside the simulation sat forward in their seats. This was the moment they had seen this chase before, and they knew how it always ended. The prey ran, the hunter leapt, and the ice turned red. But this time, something in the human's movements was different. He was not fleeing blindly. Was guiding the machine exactly where he wanted it to go. His boots slammed against the fragile ground. Cracks split beneath his weight, echoing sharp like lightning. He forced himself to keep running, even as fear clawed at his chest. The machine howled behind him, its jaws glowing with a faint red mist, its claws gouging deep marks into the snow. It was close now, close enough that he could feel the tremor of its steps vibrating through his legs. The ice beneath him screamed, bending, breaking. He took one final step and hurled himself forward, rolling hard across the ground. The machine did not stop. Its momentum carried it onto the fragile ice, and for a second it seemed to hang there. Frozen in time, its red eyes glowing in triumph. Then the surface split beneath it. Cracks shot out in every direction, the sound exploding like gunfire. With a roar of tearing metal, the ice gave way. The machine dropped through, its claws scraping against the edges, its red glow sinking into the black water below. The storm swallowed its sound as the waves closed over it. The human lay flat on the ground, his chest heaving, his body trembling from the cold and from the nearness of death. But he had done it. The first time in the history of the Arctic hunt, one of the hunters had fallen. The watchers outside did not cheer. They were silent, stunned, as if the air itself had been stolen from their lungs. This was not supposed to happen. The machines were perfect. Simulation was designed to be hopeless. Yet now, on their screens, a human had broken the rules. And he was still alive. The masters of the game exchanged looks, unsure if what they were witnessing was a mistake or a beginning. But the human knew the truth. One machine was gone, but many remained. Could hear them in the distance. Their howls sharper now, angrier, like the storm itself was furious. They had seen the trap, and they would not fall for it again. The hunt was no longer just a test. It had become personal. The machines were not only predators, they were learning. The human rose, pulling his gear tighter against his frozen body. His victory meant survival for one more night, but it also meant every step from now on would be harder. Hunters would adapt, the land would grow colder, and the storm would not stop. Yet deep inside, as he vanished into the blizzard once more, there was a fire in his eyes. He had faced death, and he had turned it back. He was not prey anymore. He was becoming something else, something the Watchers had never expected to see inside their perfect simulation. And as the red lights of the surviving hunters burned through the snow behind him, the game shifted into something new. It was no longer a hunt, it was a war. Far away from the storm, beyond the blizzard and the biting cold, a hall of glass and steel stretched into silence. Rows of glowing screens filled the air with shifting light, each one showing a piece of the Arctic. Simulation. The Watchers sat in shadow, their faces half lit by the storm's glow on the monitors. They were not men or women of flesh, not exactly. Their forms were long, elegant, their skin lined with faint patterns that pulsed faintly like circuits. Their eyes did not blink, they simply tracked the movements of the game with mechanical precision. And yet, tonight, for the first time in years, something disturbed their stillness. One of the hunters was gone. It had vanished beneath the ice, dragged down into the freezing water where no prey had ever let it before. The screens replayed the moment again and again, slow and sharp, the human's desperate dive, the cracking surface. The machine's roar as it fell. No one spoke, but unease rippled through the room like an unseen wind. The hunt had never failed. Prey was always consumed. Yet this human had not only survived, he had destroyed one of their perfect creations. That was not supposed to be possible. At the center of the hall, a tall figure rose. His frame was thin but towering, wrapped in robes that shimmered with faint light, his face hidden behind a mask carved from obsidian. He was the master of the hunt, the architect of the simulation, the one who had overseen hundreds of trials across dozens of worlds. His voice, when it broke the silence, was low and edged with anger. "Explain." No one answered at first. One of the Watchers bent closer to the screens, his long fingers tapping across the light. "It is unrecorded," he said, his voice sharp with disbelief. The human calculated the weakness of the terrain. He used the land itself against the hunter. Calculated. The master repeated, the word bitter in his mouth. No prey calculates. They run, they scream, they fall. That is the law of the game. His gaze turned back to the human figure on the screen, a tiny shadow lost in the storm, moving with deliberate, careful steps. Not like prey, not like a victim, something else, something dangerous. Around him the others whispered in unease. This one is different. He does not tire as quickly. He learns. The words echoed in the chamber, each one feeding the fear that no one wanted to name. If prey could learn, if prey could adapt, then they were no longer prey. Were something closer to the hunters themselves. And that thought unsettled even the coldest of them. The master raised his hand, silencing the whispers. Then we make it harder. Release the others. Double the hunt. The storm itself will be his enemy. His masked face tilted slightly, his voice dripping with venom. He will not leave this game alive. Back inside the storm, the human felt it before he saw it. The air grew heavier, the snow sharper, the howls of the machines multiplying until they blended with the roar of the wind. More hunters had been unleashed. The red lights pierced the white distance, spreading out in a wide circle to trap him. He was bleeding still, every step burning in his leg, but he pushed forward, his eyes locked on the storm's horizon. Somewhere out there, hidden in the endless white, was survival. But deep inside the Arctic simulation, a truth was shifting. The Watchers thought they were tightening the game. They thought they were closing their trap. But with every new challenge, every new trial, the human grew stronger. His mind burned sharper, his instincts hardened. The machines were learning to kill him, but he was learning faster. And for the first time, the hunters were not certain of their victory. For the first time, the Watchers felt fear. The snowstorm thickened until the world itself seemed to vanish. There was no sky, no earth, only the endless white tearing at the human's face. His breath came hard, turning into frost against his scarf. His legs shook with exhaustion, but his mind remained sharp, calculating. Behind him, the hunter's lights cut through the storm like bloody stars, closing in from every direction. Their growls mixed with the wind, a sound both mechanical and animal. Like steel trying to imitate a beast, he moved low, half crawling, half running, keeping his body hidden behind jagged ridges of ice. His ears tracked the sound of each hunter, listening for patterns. One circled too wide, another charged too quickly. They were fast, yes, but they were predictable. That was their weakness. The human stopped beneath a frozen outcrop, forcing his lungs to slow. He looked around the endless storm and realized something no prey was meant to realize. The world itself was his weapon. The machine saw it only as terrain, but he saw it as a battlefield. The first hunter appeared from the fog. Its black frame crouched low, eyes glowing with a hungry red. It stalked forward, the snow crunching beneath its steel claws. The human picked up a broken shard of ice, sharp as glass, and hurled it with all his strength. The shard struck the frozen ridge above, shattering it. A wall of snow collapsed onto the machine, burying it deep. For a moment, silence returned, broken only by the faint sparks under the snow. One down, but there were more. The second hunter came from the side, faster, smarter, its claws scraping sparks against the ice. The human rolled aside at the last second, letting the machine's momentum carry it into a half-frozen lake. The ice cracked beneath its weight, plunging it into the dark water. The human didn't wait to watch it sink. He ran every step driving, pain through his wounded leg. The storm was no longer his enemy. It was his cover, his shield. He used it the way the machines could not. Far away in the glass hall, the Watchers leaned closer to their glowing screens. The storm distorted their vision, but even through the white blur, they could see the truth. The prey was fighting back. The human was not supposed to last this long. It's not supposed to destroy their hunters one by one. Whispers filled the chamber again. He should be broken. He should be finished. Why does he endure? The master of the hunt sat motionless, his black mask reflecting the storm's glow. Da-da-da-da-da. His voice cut through the whispers like a blade. Because he is not prey. The words hung heavy in the air, drawing silence across the chamber. None of them dared to speak against him, but the thought crawled into their minds and refused to leave. If he was not prey, then what was he? Back in the storm, the human pressed onward. His body was failing, his blood freezing, but his spirit burned with something the machines would never understand. Refusal. He would not lie down in the snow and die quietly. He would not give the hunters their victory. Every step was an act of defiance. Every heartbeat a declaration that he was more than the game they had built. And as he stumbled deeper into the endless white, the storm roared around him like an ancient voice, carrying his struggle across the frozen world. The Watchers believed they controlled the hunt. But the human was rewriting the rules. And somewhere buried beneath his exhaustion and fear, he knew one thing with certainty. If he survived this night, the hunters would never forget his name. The storm howled louder than ever. A living wall of snow and ice that swallowed everything. The human could barely see his own hands in front of his face, yet he pushed forward through the endless white. His body screamed for rest, His wounds burned, and every breath cut his lungs like knives. But his mind refused to surrender. Somewhere behind him, the hunters still moved, their red eyes flashing like distant fires in the blizzard. They were relentless, but so was he. The ground beneath his boots trembled. He knew what it meant: 3 hunters, maybe 4, closing in fast. He crouched low, pressing his hand against the ice, and felt the vibration spread like a warning through the frozen earth. The storm wasn't just his cover anymore, it was his ally. He remembered the cracks in the glacier he had seen hours ago, the fragile ridges ready to fall. The machines were strong, but the ice was older, heavier, and merciless. When the first hunter leaped through the storm, claws raised, the human didn't run. Instead, he slammed his body against a tall, narrow ridge of frozen stone. It shook loose, collapsing in an avalanche of ice. The machine was buried instantly, its red glow vanishing beneath the snow. The others slowed, circling carefully now, but their delay gave him a moment. He limped up a slope, breathing hard, searching the horizon. The endless storm stretched forever, but in its chaos, he saw his chance. Another growl came from his right. A hunter broke through the storm faster than the rest, its steel claws flashing. The human waited until the last second, then dove aside, rolling across the ice. The hunter's momentum carried it forward straight into a hidden fissure. The ground gave way beneath it, swallowing it into the black depths below. The crash echoed like thunder. The storm itself seemed to answer. The watchers in the glass hall leaned forward, their eyes wide. For the first time in centuries, they were watching not a hunt, but a war. The human had no weapons, no armor, yet he was reshaping the simulation into something new. He was fighting as if the storm belonged to him. Whispers filled the chamber. Again, but this time they carried fear. It should not be possible. The storm obeys him. What is he becoming? The master of the hunt stood silent, but his grip on the chair's edge tightened. His voice was cold, sharp. He is adapting. The words fell heavy across the hall. Adaptation was what the hunters were designed for. And yet here was one human, wounded and freezing, turning their perfect simulation into his battlefield. Back. In the storm, the human's strength was fading. His vision blurred, his hands shook, but he forced himself to move. He knew one truth: the hunt would never end unless he ended it himself. And so he climbed higher into the heart of the blizzard, where the storm was strongest. The hunters followed, their red lights glowing in the white chaos. The human reached the top of the ridge and stopped. He could go no further. The final stand would be here. The hunters appeared out of the snow one by one, their growls vibrating. Through the storm, 3 of them circling like wolves. Their claws gleamed, their red eyes fixed on him. For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the wind. Then the human moved. He grabbed a shard of frozen stone and slammed it into the ground, cracking the ice beneath his feet. The hunters lunged, but the glacier shattered first. The ground collapsed in a roar of thunder and snow. The ridge broke apart, an avalanche, swallowing everything. The human threw himself toward a narrow ledge, clinging to the ice with frozen fingers. Below him, the hunters were swept away, vanishing into the storm's endless abyss. Their red lights flickered once, then disappeared forever. Silence. Only the storm remained, howling across the broken glacier. The human lay still, chest heaving, eyes wide. He had survived. Not because he was stronger, not because he was faster, but because he refused to be prey. He had turned the storm into his weapon and written his own ending. Far away in the glass hall, silence filled the chamber. The watchers stared at the empty screens where the hunters' signals had vanished. For the first time, the simulation had failed. The master of the hunt stood slowly, his mask catching the cold light. His voice was low, but every word cut like steel. "Send word," he said. "The galaxy must be warned. Humanity does not run. Humanity hunts."